What would you do if a man stood in a courtroom and confessed to a cold-blooded murder, only for the judge to let him walk out the front door 5 minutes later? In 1806, London was rocked by the case of John Pope, a man who admitted to helping strangle a wealthy widow in her own home. The evidence was there. The confession was signed, but the law did something today's viewers might find impossible to believe. It protected the killer to punish the police. This isn't just a story about a brutal crime. It's about the invisible shield that stops the government from becoming more dangerous than the criminals themselves. In the next 8 minutes, you'll see how a single improper promise turned a guaranteed execution into a shocking acquittal that changed legal history forever. The setting is Maycock Street, a quiet stretch of cobblestone near the bustling Blackfriars Road in London. It's August 1806. This is a city of extreme contrasts, where the scent of the Thames' stagnant water drifts into the parlors of the wealthy. Living in one of these comfortable homes is Mrs. and Maria Pooley, a widow known for her quiet life and considerable fortune. But Mrs. Pooley wasn't as safe as her heavy door suggested. Two men, John Maycock and John Pope, had been watching her. They weren't master criminals. They were laborers who had traded their tools for a darker ambition. They knew Mrs. Pooley lived alone, and more importantly, they knew exactly how to exploit a structural weakness in her home. While the rest of London slept, they were busy counting the bricks in her wash-house wall, calculating just how much effort it would take to dismantle her security from the outside in. The break-in was surprisingly surgical. Maycock and Pope didn't smash through the front door or shatter a window. Instead, they went to the wash house at the rear of the property and began to methodically remove bricks from the wall, one by one, until they had created an opening just large enough to reach through and slide the bolt. Once inside, they didn't rush. They waited in the shadows of the silent house as the hours ticked toward dawn. When Mrs. Pooley finally came downstairs to start her morning, she didn't find the quiet start to her day she expected. She found two men waiting for her. The struggle was brief but brutal. Maycock stepped behind her and used his strength to strangle the widow, while Pope stood by, a silent accomplice to the violence. They stripped the house of approximately 90 pounds, roughly equivalent to several years' wages for a common laborer, and vanished into the London fog, leaving a cold crime scene behind them. For a few weeks, it seemed like Maycock and Pope had committed the perfect crime. But in the 19th century, a sudden change in fortune was as good as a fingerprint. These two men, who had spent their lives in threadbare clothes and drafty rooms, were suddenly seen around Blackfriars Road, draped in expensive new waistcoats, flashing gold, and spending money with the confidence of aristocrats. The local constables weren't blind. They knew the math didn't add up. They brought the two men in for questioning, but suspicion isn't a conviction. There were no witnesses to the break-in, and no one had seen the struggle inside the house. The stolen cash was obvious. To secure a death sentence, the prosecution needed something more. They needed the story from the inside. They needed one of the men to break. The constables decided to isolate the weaker link, John Pope. They didn't use physical force. Instead, they used a far more effective weapon, hope. They leaned in and gave Pope a hint. They suggested that if he told the truth and pointed the finger at Maycock, the law might look the other way regarding his own involvement. Driven by the fear of the gallows, Pope crumbled. He sat down and poured out every dark detail. He explained the removal of the bricks, the long wait in the shadows, and exactly how Maycock had ended the widow's life. It was a complete, signed confession that tied both men to the murder. To the constables, this was a victory. They had the story, they had the names, and they had a signed document that guaranteed a conviction. They thought they had closed the case, but in reality, they had just planted a legal landmine that was about to blow the entire prosecution apart. The constables walked into the courtroom
signed and sealed,
but they had made a fatal error in the eyes of the law.
These are
in their desperation to solve
the murder of Mrs. Pooley.
They had forgotten a fundamental rule of justice. A confession is only valid if it is free and voluntary. By offering Pope a hint of mercy, a promise that he might save his own neck by talking, they had polluted the evidence. In the 19th century, British judges were becoming increasingly wary of police overreach. privilege. They understood a dangerous truth. If the government can promise you freedom in exchange for words, you might say anything, even if it's a lie. To the court, an induced confession wasn't just a shortcut. It was a threat to the liberty of every citizen. The constables hadn't just secured a statement. They had accidentally built a legal shield around a murderer. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted the moment Lord Chief Baron MacDonald took the bench. He wasn't looking at the blood-stained history of the crime. He was looking at the conduct of the man in uniform. When the prosecution attempted to read John Pope's confession into the record, the defense pounced. They revealed the deal made in the shadows of the prison cell. The judge's reaction was swift and sharp. He ruled that the moment the constable suggested Pope might be spared for speaking, the confession became legally poisoned. Under the law, a confession must be free and voluntary, flowing from the conscience, not from a bargain for one's life. MacDonald understood a terrifying reality. If the court allowed the police to buy confessions with promises, they could easily manufacture them with threats. To protect the sanctity of the witness stand, the judge did the unthinkable. He struck the confession from the record entirely. With the stroke of a pen, the prosecution's strongest weapon vanished. Without that confession, the case against John Pope collapsed into nothing. Because there was no other direct evidence placing him inside the widow's home, the law left the judge with no other choice. In a moment that stunned the gallery, Lord Chief Baron MacDonald ordered John Pope to be acquitted. A man who had just admitted to a brutal murder, a man who had helped dismantle a woman's home and stood by as she was killed, was told he was free to go. He walked out of the courtroom and onto the streets of London, shielded by the very system he had violated. But for his partner, John Maycock, the outcome was very different. Since Pope was now a free man and no longer a co-defendant, the prosecution called him to the stand as a witness. Pope testified against his friend to save himself one last time, ensuring that while he walked free, Maycock would walk to the gallows. It's hard to watch a killer walk free on a technicality. It feels like a failure of justice. But from the perspective of the law, the acquittal of John Pope was a massive victory. This case helped solidify a rule we still use today, the inducement rule. The court wasn't trying to be kind to a murderer. It was trying to keep the police honest. If the government is allowed to suggest a confession out of you or promise you your life in exchange for a story, the truth becomes a commodity that can be bought and sold. By throwing out Pope's confession, the judge was sending a message to every constable in England. If you break the rules to catch a criminal, the law will protect the criminal just to spite you. It is a harsh, cold reality of our justice system. Sometimes, a guilty man must go free so that an innocent man is never forced to confess to a crime he didn't commit. John Maycock was executed on March 23, 1807, at Horsemonger Lane Jail, but the name that lived on in legal textbooks was John Pope. He became the living embodiment of a system that values the process more than the result. We like to think of the law as a sword that strikes down the wicked, but in reality, it is often a shield, a barrier that protects us all by refusing to let the state take shortcuts. It is a bitter irony of history. The widow, Mrs. Pooley, lost her life. One man lost his soul to the gallows, and another man kept his freedom because the system decided that its own integrity was worth more than a single murderer's conviction. Next time you hear about a criminal
getting off on a technicality, this is what it looks
because
like.
That technicality
a man
is the only
walking
thing
between the
standing
principle
between
he
you
created
and
and
a
the
system
city that
could
will use it
otherwise
long
make you say
after he is gone.